That came, excellent. That came in October. Today, it includes fundraising, program management, case management, and outcomes management in its core SKU. And there's an additional SKU that you can buy that expands it into grant management as well. All of it's built on core, so that means that there's no more NPC underscore, NPC2, NPC03, or yeah, all of the different things that you saw on your objects. It's all core objects, and that has some great benefits and has some drawbacks. So we'll talk a little bit about that today.
Next slide, please.
This is me again.
This is you. I'm next after this.
All right. So the other thing I want to talk to you and introduce you to is the Salesforce Commons. Raise your hands online for anybody who is familiar with the Commons or has participated in a sprint. Okay, fantastic. For those of you who haven't, Salesforce Commons is a community-driven, it provides a platform for the community to address gaps in Salesforce functionality or needs that the community has in an open source environment. So you may have heard of some products that were developed by the community and are and have been helped along by the Commons program. If you've used Nonprofit Success Pack, if you've used Outbound Funds, if you've used the Declarative Lookup Rollup Summary tool, those are all products that are either developed by the Commons or are currently managed by the community. So there are 2,000 plus global participants and 40 community-led products. The Nonprofit Cloud Best Practices group is one of those projects, and I'll turn that to Dar to talk about.
All right, so NPC-BP, I'm just going to shorten it to that because I don't want to keep repeating Nonprofit Cloud Best Practices the entire hour. So we refer to it as NPC-BP. We started it because when NPSP, the Nonprofit Success Pack, was released, I don't know how many folks were around then, but not so great when it first came out in the first version. And then got community feedback, went to a second version. Community feedback went to the third version. And folks may not realize now that when you get NPSP installed, there's actually an entire set of community best practices in a configuration file that runs on top of that. If you were to just get NPSP without that, your opportunity record types would be gone. Some of your layout stuff would be gone. Some of the actually all the pre-configured customized rollouts would not be set for you yet. So that's all developed community best practices. And that all came out of sprints. So when NPC was released, we realized that, oh, we're going to need the same thing here. You know, this is going to be a product that is going to need some help. It's going to need some community best practices, just like NPSP did. It's going to need some community feedback. And if any of you have worked in NPC, you know that when you get it, sorry about that, my notes just went to sleep on me. When you get it, it's pretty much a blank org that you need to do a lot of config in. So we work around trying to develop what are those best practices. We don't want 86 flavors of how to install NPC out there that are some of them pretty messed up. We're trying to help provide some best practices so that any given nonprofit could get a fairly standardized, at least base install, like they do with NPSP. So that's some of our goals here. And to that end, we have developed the Community Asset Hub, and that's where we publish all of the things that we work on. A lot of people point to me and say, oh, that's Dar's group. It's not. We have over 50 people participating in the group. Yes, I started the group, big deal, but there are over 50 people participating in that group. So it's not just one person. And we're all volunteers. We are SI partners like us, nonprofit staff. There are even Salesforce staff who are like, I get to go make the things that I can't actually put in the product. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to make them. So at the last sprint, we had 5 Salesforce employees participating with us, happily contributing to it. So we have a pretty wide community of people contributing to it. And we've produced a bunch of stuff, some of which I've got up here on the slide. So we have things like use cases. Right now, we've got our fundraising use cases out there. So if you're new to Nonprofit Cloud and you're not sure how to do, like, okay, I've got a donation, but I need to steward that. It's going to be a major gift and it's going to have 6 payments over time that I need to schedule. How do I do that in Nonprofit Cloud? So we had fundraising use cases that would show you, here's a donor with a major giving opportunity with multiple payments. How do I structure that in Nonprofit Cloud? What are some gotchas I need to think about? What are some prerequisites I need to have done? So that's all our fundraising use cases. For stakeholder management, and Toby's going to tell you some more about stakeholder management in a minute, we've built a package, some flows that we think will help you with some basic stakeholder management functionality, make some things easier. We've got a whole package of those. We've got report types for stakeholder management, some custom reports made for that. Free, downloadable, unmanaged package. Pull it down, do with it what you will in NPC. We've got our NPSP to NPC translations. For those of you that are used to NPSP, NPC might be a little confusing. So we've built charts with all of our community members to help you translate. If I'm looking for a particular functionality, I know what it is in NPSP, but what does that look like in NPC? So we've got those for fundraising, program management, stakeholder management, grant making, and we're working on case management. That one's not quite finished yet. And then we also have our program management mapping. There's other resources on there as well, but these are some of our major ones, where we took the program management mapping for NPSP workshop deck, we flipped it on its head, did it for NPC, and published that right up. So these are kind of some of the things that we produce with the group. And again, it's all public, it's all free, and we'll just keep producing resources as long as the group goes, which will probably be for a long time. Next slide, please. And back to Toby.
Okay, so we've told you a little bit about Nonprofit Cloud. We've told you a little bit about the Nonprofit Cloud Best Practices Group, which is what we're here to talk about. And now we're just going to get into some of the things that we really spent a lot of time with and talking about. And it was the things we noticed that folks had trouble getting their heads around. And the first one is party relationship groups, person accounts, relationships, and you. So how you can use these things to model the real world that is represented by your organization's relationships with all of your stakeholders. So starts with a person account. Go there. So you notice here there is no account. There's no household. There's just a person. Emma exists on her own. She interacts with your organization on her own. You don't need any other hangers-on to know about your relationship with Emma. So this is the simplest piece. You don't need a parent account. Next one. You may want to know about Emma's familial relationships with and with the people that she lives with. You may not treat them all as a household, but you may want to know about them because you have a program that interacts and needs to know who is the parent of this kid who's participating in my program. Or you may want to know who the spouse of this donor is so that we can look at them both together. Next one. You may want to know what account Emma is related to, but she may be related to more than one account. She may be the board member at one organization, or she may be an employee at another organization. And she may have lots of other relationships with other organizations that you want to know about, whether it's because of program participation or fundraising or grant funding. Next one. You may actually want to interact with this group as a household, and that's where your party relationship groups and your households come in handy. So that is all things that you're used to being able to model in Salesforce and in Nonprofit Success Pack, and you can do that here just like that. But there's some more things that are available in Nonprofit Cloud. Next one. You may have relationships between the household and a business, or between two businesses. So now you have account relationships, and you can understand that this law firm is the attorney for this family. And these folks, this household is the neighbor of that person. So you can model those types of relationships in this model, but you can go further than that. Wait, there's more. In addition, you can represent relationships, coworker relationships, friend relationships, volunteer relationships to other organizations, and just groups that exist that aren't incorporated, aren't an account, but are a group. So when you look at this all together, it really can become very complex, and you can model that using the tools that are out of the box in Nonprofit Cloud, and a little bit of help. And the little bit of help comes from our Best Practices Hub. So if we look at how this looks inside of Nonprofit Cloud, we'll go to the next slide, and we can see a familiar family. This is the Weasleys, Arthur and Molly from the Hollywood blockbuster film and books, and all their kids. So you can put all of that together and look at them as related people and see the relationships between Arthur and all of his kids. You can see the group detail for the household, and you can see who is still part of the house. So we may want to take this group that is the Arthur and Molly Weasley household, split it when Bill moves out, and create two households out of it. And that's stuff we can do with Nonprofit Cloud. So it can get much more complex than that, but that's what we wanted to show you. Now, like I said, you may need a little bit of help. So if you go to the next slide, we put some pieces together, and Dara already talked about this. We have templates for some party role relationships that we think are very helpful, that you can download and use it as a direct upload. I did it yesterday, in fact. We have a unmanaged package that is packed with flows that make creating some of those relationships easier, because there's a lot of records. So we put all of that together here, and those are just a few of the things that you'll find in the Best Practices Hub.
Next, I am. Extension objects, exploring your codependency. If you haven't worked in an industry cloud, you're probably looking at this and going, I've never heard of extension objects. What are they? Next slide, please. These are objects that have fields that we might find or expect to find on something else. So we might expect to find demographics on contacts or on a person account. If you're used to NPSP, you're thinking about the roll-up fields. We're used to seeing those on account. That doesn't happen in Nonprofit Cloud. They exist on things called extension objects. So why do they exist and what are they? Some examples of these are donor gift summaries, holds roll-ups that you might expect to find on account, contact profile, holding demographic fields that you might expect to find on contact, other fields that you might expect to find on campaign, also in another object. So why do we have these? Why aren't we just putting these fields on the core objects in industry clouds? This is one of the tables from NPCBP's blog. This is talking about our design differences between NPSP and NPC, and these are really core to understand. You'll understand a lot more about NPC and industry clouds if you start here. And what I have highlighted is why these extension objects exist. If I'm building a managed package like NPSP, and I want to put 400 fields on the account object, I get to put 400 fields on the account object because it's my managed package and I'm going to make them all custom fields. My customers aren't going to like it that I just put 400 fields on account, but I can do it if I want to. But if I'm building on core and I've got 4 dozen roll-up fields for donations that I need to go on account, guess what happens? I do not get to put those on account because then everyone in Salesforce gets my 4 dozen roll-up fields on account. And that can't happen. Very few new fields appear on those core objects in Salesforce. And you can imagine how many of the teams at Salesforce are in line to get their fields onto account. Very few of them make them there, and they tend to need to be universally usable. So I'm a poor Salesforce engineer. I got my 4 dozen roll-up fields. What am I supposed to do with them? That's where our extension objects come from. They need to go somewhere. And that is one of the key differences between NPSP and NPC that we highlight with things like our translation charts. It's a very different build and it's a very different world working in a fully managed package where you can have a lot of custom items. And when you're building on core and you cannot put those things on the core objects. Next slide, please. So one of the ways that NPC and other industry clouds deal with these extension objects is they need to connect them to the object they go with. Go ahead and hit next. Here's an example of one, outreach summary rollups connected to campaign. Go ahead and hit again. This is one that you're going to run into a lot if you're using NPC. This is the donor gift summary object. So it's got all those rollups. It's where that poor Salesforce engineer finally found a home for all of their rollups. It's got a one-to-one unique relationship with an account, either a business account or a person account, so it could be for households. And they're displayed in an LWC called Related Record Detail Display. We just call it R2D2. It's a lot easier to say. So there's some LWCs that facilitate this in NPC, but you have to learn to get used to dealing with extension objects and learn about that codependency and deal with that when you're working in an industry cloud. Some of the objects are roll-up, like donor gift summary. They're going to hold roll-ups, but some of them also just hold extra attributes. What Toby was talking about with households, the party relationship group, which is kind of a weird name for a household object, but that's what holds the household fields or the designation that that is indeed a household in nonprofit cloud. It's also used by multiple other industry clouds. Automotive uses it, public sector, education uses it, financial services uses it, nonprofit cloud uses it. So it's become a standardized model using that extension object for a household. So you've got some roll-up extension objects, some non. Roll-ups are done with a different tool called data processing engine. If you're from NPSP land, you know the customizable roll-ups. They're all done in Apex. You're using a tool called data processing engine. That comes out of a little bit different history that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. In terms of what this means for nonprofit cloud best practices groups, we give some pointers on this, but we are not doing things like helping you build customized roll-ups for NPC, and we're not doing that because doing data processing engines can be very complex, and often individual nonprofits want a very specific set of roll-up fields. And so it's difficult to build standardized templates for nonprofit A who wants to see the last 2 years of hard and soft credit roll-ups together, and nonprofit B who wants the last 3 years of membership levels A, B, and C rolled up into a different field. You can't really standardize when you're dealing with stuff like that. So for now, for NPC BP, we provide some tips and some gotchas on things like this on the extension objects. But we are not providing other resources for helping with the rollups. Where we are providing resources on these, if you think about extension objects, you can imagine one of the very large problems these might cause. And Evan is now aware of this because we pulled him into the reporting group. Reporting. When you've got extension objects and you're trying to do something like report on household rollups or giving, you've got this extension object and you can't go anywhere from that when you're building your report type. That's the end. So you need to get that party relationship group, and you need your account, you need your people in the household, and you need that extension object for the rollups. So that's a problem for reporting. So an area where we are working with this type of thing with extension objects in nonprofit cloud best practices is our reporting subgroup that we launched in March. We sucked Evan right into that, and now he is stuck with this problem as well. Next slide. And this one, I think, Toby, this goes back to you.
Yeah. So we said that one of the functional areas inside of nonprofit cloud is fundraising. So we're going to talk about getting over your fear of commitment or commitments, as the case may be. So there's a lot more flexibility in this data model as well, because in the nonprofit success pack data model, the opportunity was carrying a lot of weight. It represented a solicitation, it represented a commitment, and it represented a fulfillment of a commitment. So it was tracking a lot of different stuff that was pretty heavyweight for that little old opportunity object. Opportunity object stays central to the fundraising model, but it represents what it was intended to, and that is the solicitation of revenue. So if you go forward, you can have lots of other revenue that comes in that doesn't involve solicitation. So if you have a check that's written, it arrives at your door, and it is a one-time gift, that was unsolicited. So it doesn't require an opportunity. It's a one-time gift. It's over here on this side. There's a transaction object that represents a single event, a single giving event, and it can be used in isolation, and it doesn't need anything else in order to work. So that's one part of it. You could have a recurring gift or a pledge, And that recurring gift or pledge may not have been solicited directly. It may have been solicited through marketing efforts, or it could be somebody who just decided to give a recurring gift. So that represents a commitment and is represented by the gift commitment object. And you can start to project cash flow based on that commitment, but you don't need a solicitation object for it because it came in not through direct solicitation. So you could have that model, which is a commitment with transactions that fulfill that commitment. So that's the second model that you could work with Nonprofit Cloud. You could also have a major gift or a grant where it is solicited. But once that major gifts officer is finished with the solicitation and has gotten the commitment, they may move on to other things. So that opportunity can be closed and it can be passed off to donor operations, where they can manage the commitment and the fulfillment of that commitment with the other two objects without worrying about having to adjust opportunities for reporting purposes or whatever it is. So that's a little introduction into the gift data model in Nonprofit Cloud. Next one. And here's what it looks like inside of Nonprofit Cloud. So you might have a fundraising timeline on the left where opportunities and gift commitments and transactions are organized in a timeline. And then you might have a commitment object, which is up here in the middle, and it can show you your upcoming gift transactions and show you the schedule of payments that are coming out. And then you can have that gift transaction, which is just that individual gift that is in the bottom right. So that's a little preview of what it looks like in Nonprofit Cloud. Now, how do we help from the Nonprofit Cloud best practice in NPCBP? I don't abbreviate.
I do. It's okay.
Nonprofit Cloud Best Practices group. Next slide. We have a variety of fundraising use cases that are really very helpful, and you can see some of them there: single payment, recurring bequests, handling adjustments, in-kind gifts, inbound grants, all of the different use cases that we came up, and there's some pretty good detail behind each of those that you can find in the Asset Hub. Dar.
All right. Our fourth area that we find that people struggle with. Next slide, please. Omni Studio and industry common components. It's okay to say no. If you have no familiarity with Industry Cloud, you're looking at this slide and you're going, Omni Studio, I've never encountered this in Salesforce before, and what the heck are industry common components? If you are familiar with industry clouds, you probably just flinched a little when I put Omni Studio up there because you've tried it and it's maybe not a pleasant experience for you. Let's start with Omni Studio. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Industry clouds exist because of a company called Velocity. Velocity was an independent company, and they started building out pretty complex, very nice managed packages, often centered around a tool called Omni Studio. They built out 6 to 8 of these verticals you're familiar with: automotive, financial services, healthcare. Salesforce, along about 2020, was like, y'all are doing a really good job over there. And they bought Velocity. So industry clouds basically exist because of Velocity. And one of Velocity's core components is Omni Studio. So you're going to find it in every industry cloud. There really isn't a way to avoid this if you're dealing with one of the industry clouds or Nonprofit Cloud. So you're going to run into it. They can do some really nice data manipulation. Probably if you run across Omni Studio, some of the things you're going to see most often are items I've got up there on the first 2 lines: flex cards, OmniScripts, integration procedures, and data mappers. It used to be called data wrappers, much more fun name. They've changed it to data mappers, kind of boring. But you'll see those. They do a lot of complex data manipulation. You can do inner joins, outer joins. You can manipulate data within Salesforce, pull in external data, do some nice stuff, but it's complex to work with. Next slide, please. One of the things Omni Studio is known for is its flex cards. They are super pretty. You are going to run across these in Nonprofit Cloud. They have a nice UI. If you look on the right, you can see that's an output on a flex card of some OmniScript. You may be saying, hey, this would be nice to be able to do this in Flow. One of the reasons people will sometimes choose Omni Studio is because you can have these very nice outputs to them. But again, it's complex. They've got JSON running behind them, and they can be complex to compose. You do not have to use them if you're doing nonprofit cloud, but you are going to run into them. So the one I have on the left, that's an out-of-the-box flex card that comes with NPC. It totals up the benefits automatically, and there's something called data processing engine that I mentioned earlier that does the roll-ups in nonprofit cloud. Data processing engine also came from Velocity and from Omni Studio, also is JSON based on the back end. And they have an out-of-the-box one for this. So in some instances, you're going to run across Omni Studio, but it's a plug-and-play version of Omni Studio. You can clone that DPE, turn it on, and it will automatically populate this flex card. You don't have to do anything else. So in some instances of Omni Studio, it's okay to turn it on. It's very simple. It's not going to cause a burden for your nonprofit admins. You're going to hit it in some other places. Fundraising acknowledgements and receipts if you're using the fundraising features of Nonprofit Cloud. Also comes with some pre-done data mappers, some pre-done Omni scripts that you don't need to alter. A little bit more complex implementation. It's using document generation. You've got to stage your documents correctly with only certain merge fields in them. But again, medium level complexity, you could probably deliver it to nonprofit admins, okay, and they could deal with it. You then get into a lot more complex uses of Omni Studio. You've got LOAs and grant making. You've got fully blown doing, Omni scripts and data mappers from scratch. It's a fairly big burden to place on a nonprofit admin. So that's where it starts becoming, it's okay to say no. You need to carefully consider if you're using Omni Studio, do you want to avoid it and just go with flow? Or do you want to go ahead and try and do Omni Studio for this? And what's the impact on the nonprofit client? So this is one of those areas where just because it exists in nonprofit cloud, you don't have to use it. In terms of nonprofit cloud best practices, we are not doing Omni Studio resources for folks. Again, it's a complex topic. Its documentation is not great. We'll just admit that. The Salesforce documentation isn't super on Omni Studio. They're supposed to be improving it, but it can be difficult to work with. It's not an area where we feel like we can put resources out there because we think we'd also be fielding a lot of questions on it, and we're not necessarily qualified to do that or have the time to do that. So for us, Omni Studio is kind of going to be a hands-off area, but you will encounter it in nonprofit cloud. Next slide, please. Then we have industry common components. Just start clicking, Evan. There's one, there's one, there's another one, there's one, there's one. Oh, hang on, there's one, keep going. There's one, there's one, there's one. Keep going, there's one, and some more, and then there's some more, and there's some more, and you've got some more, and you've got some more. There's a lot in nonprofit cloud. These are all what are called industry common components. So what are these? Go ahead and go to the next slide. There are 34 of these in nonprofit cloud. It's actually technically 38 because the feature sets in nonprofit cloud, program and case, fundraising and that, those are actually all considered industry common components now. So you have to decide which one of these you're going to use. There's a whole lot on the menu in nonprofit cloud. It's a lot more complex than NPSP. Just because they exist, you don't have to use them all. So you could have a situation, Toby showed before, a slide with timeline on it, which is one of the components you can see here. Would it be better to use timeline, or would it be better to use a related list or something else? You can decide on that. Would it be better to use an art graph in that case? There are some places where you absolutely should be using something like an actionable relationship center graph, what we call art graphs. Trying to do outcomes management without art graphs, it's incredibly confusing data model. You want to put the art graphs in there so they can use it. So consider this with NPC a menu of things to choose from. It's a buffet. Take what works for your client. Is not a, you have to take everything, one of everything on there, because that can end up being quite the mess, as you just saw in the previous slide with the attack of the common components. Some of those pages were a little bit crazy with a lot of the stuff that was on them. Next slide on this one, please. In terms of what this means for NPC BP, we are going to be providing some resources, and have already started work on some of them, art graph recipes. Art graphs really get used a lot in NPC. That's going to be one of those industry common components you want to dig in on and use. Toby's already showed it in a couple places, like with households and relationships. We're working on some templates with those. You get a few out of the box, but folks often kind of stumble trying to set up others. They don't quite understand how the relationships and the displays work on them, so we're working on some recipes for those. We also might look at tackling the advanced CSV import. For those of you familiar with NPSP and NPSP data importer, there's no equivalent in NPC, but actually there is. It's just that you don't know it's there. And it's called advanced CSV import that can do multi-object import. So we're looking at whether or not it would be feasible for us to provide some templates for that, kind of like you have templates for NPSP data importer. So we are looking at some of the industry common components. And one thing I wanted to highlight on here, this is one of our pages again, it goes back to that NPSP versus NPC. What I have highlighted here is why all of these industry common components are there. When you're doing a managed package, you're working on just your package. And you might be able to port parts of it to other packages. But when you're doing shared development in industry cloud, nothing in NPC, or almost nothing, is original or solely for NPC. You might look at fundraising, which is considered a common component, and go, oh yeah, that's just for nonprofits. No, it's not. It's actually in use by Education Cloud as well. Or you look at grant making and go, yeah, that's just for nonprofits. No, it's in use by public sector solutions. Or even things like benefits, the benefits objects, it's in use by loyalty management. So is outcomes management. So you can do that shared development across, and that's where all of those industry common components come in. Very few of those originated from nonprofit cloud. They originated from other clouds. But it can be a huge advantage because you can pick up an entire thing like provider management for Health Cloud and plunk that on over for case management and NPC with almost no effort. And the NPC team didn't have to do any development on it. So it can be a huge advantage where you get a lot of extra things that you wouldn't have gotten if it was just an isolated team working.
And just to follow on with that, this is something that Dar and I were talking about the other day. It's also one of the things that's really exciting about nonprofit cloud because the pace of change is really, really phenomenal.
Yeah.
Because they don't have to develop things from scratch, we can have major component releases every release in multiples. And so a lot of this stuff that's coming out, it may look like it's small little things around the edges, but some of the things that you saw on your screen, once you dig into them, you realize this is actually a really big, well-developed component, and it's going to take a little bit of to get your head around. So it's a double-edged sword.
Go back to the last slide for just a second. For what Toby was talking about, if you find yourself struggling to keep up with those flow updates, every release comes out and you're like, oh God, there's 4 dozen things for flow. I've got to go and learn all this. NPC can feel like that sometimes too. Just in spring, they delivered stage management, which is huge. It allows you to manage workflow processes for grant making. They also delivered form framework. They had delivered it in the fall for Omni Studio only. Now you can use it with improvements for flow. And then in the winter, they also delivered the entire provider management with other stuff. So just trying to keep up with those can be a lot. So to Toby's point, it's a much faster development pace than you would see with NPSP. 2 slides down now, we'll go back to Toby.
So what are the next steps for the nonprofit best practices community group or nonprofit cloud community best practices group? So it's NPCBP. We have a program and management subgroup started. We've already begun work. You can see some of the assets that were already released. That is continuing. Use cases are coming next. We started a reporting subgroup. Thank you, Evan. We have other things that are on the way: grant making, industry common components, outcomes management, and more general and fundraising items that we need to come back to and visit. It's all volunteer driven, so we do need to kind of manage what we can do on a month by month basis. But with your help, we could probably do more. So if you're interested in joining the team, here's an email address. There's somebody monitoring those. It's not all going to Dar's email address. We're monitoring those, and we will get back to you based on that. And if you want to ask any questions, Dar and I will be here for a bit. I'll join you.
Next one.
There you go.
The link to our hub, to the best practices hub, also to this presentation. And to give you an idea of what our sprints are like when people participate, we just did one mid-March. 22 people showed up for the NPC BP team working in 3 distinct subgroups over a 2-day period and produced, I think, 4 distinct resources that went up. So it's different people. Some people stay and come to every sprint. Some people are only able to attend every once in a while. And we've had total about 50 people so far. Each subgroup has its own project manager. There's an overall project manager, and we do what we can. It's all volunteer. And we're happy for any questions. And Evan, I don't know if there's online questions at all.
Yeah, so if you're online, you can come off mute and we will hear you.
We got a question in the back. We got Ruben.
Thanks, and sorry I was late, but thank you for this. This is very helpful. One question I bumped into today and was curious about this, I have not tested it out, is lead management and lead conversion. Obviously in NPSP, it got the lead to the appropriate objects. Is that equivalent exist in NPC? I've not tested that out yet.
You wanna take?
Yeah, so this is going off of, I mean, this is not NPC and not in nonprofit cloud best practices, but it's the kind of thing that stirs questions and we probably could address. So I'll give you one answer of the way that we deal with it. We use a component that is part of the nonprofit cloud best practices hub, and it is a simple flow that takes every time somebody creates a contact accidentally, it converts it to a person account. So we've taken and added on to that. And so in the lead conversion process to convert to a person account, if you leave the account blank, it'll automatically convert to a person account, no problem. But it's what happens if you want to have a contact and an account that is part of that lead? Then it becomes a little bit of a problem because now you have a mixed account model because it creates an account that looks up directly to, a contact that looks up directly to that account. So what we've done is we recognize that as a trigger for our flow as well. We just convert that contact into a person account. There was already, because of the multiple accounts per contact functionality that's been in Salesforce for a long time, there was already an account contact relationship created, and so you now have the two things that you needed. So you've got to plug a few little holes, but it's stuff that's not terribly difficult to do.
It's also a good example of what you can do with our packages. So that little flow is one of our more popular pieces where it's really easy to create contacts all over NPC, even though you're trying to use a person account model. And so we just built a little flow that flips stray contacts to person accounts. If it's just, an orphan contact, just flip it right over to a person account. And Toby just took that and built off it to do the lead conversion.
Is there any intel about for how long NPSP will continue to be able to exist, still be supported? Are people going to be kicked off of it at some point? Is there any intel around that?
So there's no official word from Salesforce, but there's over 40,000 nonprofits on NPSP, so sunsetting that would be particularly difficult. I think it will just run for as long as it runs. You figure at some point its code base might not work anymore with core Salesforce, and that might be when it gets sunsetted. But there's not much cost to Salesforce to keep letting it run as it is. It's a very popular product. They're still provisioning people on it. So I think it'll run.
You can still newly install NPSP.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep, there's
It's
people buying
available
it
on the
every day.
Meta Deploy Install, and you can choose it when you provision your org. If you're a new nonprofit, you can choose NPSP. And quite a few orgs still do, especially the small ones. Yeah.
And that was sort of my next follow-up question of in your experience still as you've been implementing it, sort of a size differentiator? Because in my experience, which is admittedly in the small to medium-sized nonprofit space, this feels a lot like a solution looking for a problem. NPSP is incredibly adequate and more than adequate, works great. This feels why? Nothing in here seems like anything I'd need or want or be interested in, or any organization I've worked with would need or want to even touch with a 10-foot pole. So I am raising that in the let's be real about what this is, and can we talk about pros, cons, who should use this, why is this for? If it's inevitably what's coming and we got to learn it, then we got to learn it. But if when do you in your Omniforce, it's okay to say no. Nonprofit cloud, it's okay to say no. Is there a similar vibe?
Yeah,
I'll confer a little bit and then I'll switch to you.
okay.
This is where we all need our consultant t-shirts that say it depends. It's just the t-shirt we all need. It really depends on the use case. I do have small nonprofits switching to it. Sometimes it's a price consideration. If you're a case management nonprofit and you're thinking of buying NCCM, it's actually cheaper to go onto nonprofit cloud. If you're a small nonprofit that's looking at the grants management module, it's almost an exact price to go with grant making and NPC, but you'll get development in NPC and you won't in NPSP, and that can be the big differentiator. in any given software stack, does not matter if it's Salesforce, at some point you have to rebuild. At some point, your software will need a new version. And that just happens with software. NPSP started in what, 2008? It's an old package. Version 3 came out in 2013. So at some point we already know it's not scalable. So like for the larger nonprofits, they already really struggle with NPSP because of the trigger-driven table framework. And it had trouble scaling with that. NPC does have some stuff that can solve for that, like data processing engine, because that actually offloads the Einstein platform and then brings the results back. So it's offloading the processing so it doesn't jam you up like NPSP does for larger orgs. For smaller orgs, it's really a decision. A lot of them still do go with NPSP. I think there probably is a higher admin overhead for NPC, just in terms of complexity.
Sure.
It's one of the things you get with shared development. It's also one of the goals of NPC BP is to put more resources out there to make it easier for folks to adopt. And I think a lot of the SIs are also doing that too. I know a lot of us are building like our own repository
SIs,
packages
right.
too. I'm sorry, partners, implementers, consultants who implement. We're also all building our own resources as well. That's honestly where some of our BP resources come from. Consultants are contributing them after they've built them. Toby, what?
I was gonna say, and almost always do exactly what Dar said.
You realize.
But that said, I think, it is something to consider, and we've done, and I know Dar has done lots of consultations and, kind of really looking at what is your use case and does it make sense to do this now? Does it make sense to do it later? Does it make sense to do it ever? And that the result of that is not 100% nonprofit cloud. The result of that is often, well, why would you? If you don't have a reason, you don't have to.
Yeah.
And so that's, and I think it is, there are lots of choices and out there. And so it really, it depends.
It is. It's one of those where with NPSP, and this will be the last thing I'll say about it, because there may be other questions. With NPSP, it took, 5 years before it got to version 3, and then the community best practices on top of it. Version 1 just wasn't that great. It did the basics, but it had a lot of problems. So NPC isn't going to be perfect on release. But you figure in like 2 or 3 years, how many folks are going to want to launch onto NPSP. So it's also a consideration that for any given org, no matter the size, they have to think about how far down the road before they might want to convert again because of the progressive features in NPC. So that also comes into consideration, and that's size agnostic. What does the org want to have to do in terms of remigrating their org again if they think that NPC is going to have a lot more new features or features that they're looking for. So there's all sorts of variables that go into it. There isn't a hard fast, this size org should have NPSP, when you get to this many employees, you need NPC. There's not a hard and fast path there. It's always an it depends individual analysis.
Couple questions from online. Stephanie wanted to ask about that flow to flip contacts to person accounts. Does it update any records where the contact existed?
So in NPC, and I can't explain this, and without explaining person accounts, we're going to have to explain person accounts a little bit. If you are not familiar with person accounts account is really it's a virtual object, and it's basically a one-to-one contact to account. So in every person account, there's really a contact hanging out back there. And so when you're using a person account, you're often attaching things to the contact side. So when I say you flip the contact to a person account, you basically give that one-to-one relationship with a record type of person account on account, but that contact still sits there. So things are still going to remain attached. So like contact relationships, they're still attached to the contact side of that person account. So there might be an instance where you would have to do a record manipulation. There's probably something out there we're just not thinking of. But for most of the NPC stuff, it's attaching to that contact side of the person account anyway. So if you just flip it to a PA, it doesn't have an impact.
And this is something that comes up when you're thinking about integrations and automations all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the mantra in the thing that you have to put on, in a sticky note on the side of your monitor is the contact object still exists.
Yes.
It did not go away. We can still use it just like we always could. Full functionality. You never have to touch the person account if you don't really want to. You can connect right to the contact and treat it just like you always did. It just doesn't have that parent account that was a requirement that you have to drag around behind it.
It's a little hard to explain in a short amount of time.
Jay has a question. What's the relationship with Salesforce? Can the NPC BP group affect the NPC roadmap?
I don't know. We do have Salesforce employees that are actively contributing and working with us. We have a regular who works on the program and case stuff, wants to see the resources out there. We've had probably, if you look on our site, we have at least a dozen Salesforce employees listed. They often volunteer with us. They want to help too. You know, they want to improve things too. They do take our feedback. Do we actually influence the roadmap? I have no idea. Couldn't tell you. And I don't
But
know that
we definitely
we've never-
offer quite a bit.
We certainly do. We're a chatty bunch. If they ask us questions, we're gonna give them feedback. But I don't know that we could ever concretely say whether or not we influence the roadmap. I know, and Evan, you saw that live at the sprint, and they certainly will take our feedback on some of the reporting difficulties.
Yeah.
You know, being able to live demonstrate a use case that they had not run into, or, you know, something that they had not seen previously is quite valuable to the Salesforce employees to see that happening live. And we live demoed some of the reporting issues during that sprint group, so they were able to see that live. So in that way, it's quite valuable to them, I would say, because they get a little bit broader perspective by seeing us trying to work through some of these problems.
Jay's other question, when will there be tools to help with a migration from NPSP to NPC?
That is a Salesforce question. That is a bit beyond the scope of what we can do. We're volunteers.
There are 2 tools already out there. There's a migration guide, and there is a data map.
Yes.
So there are some things that have already come out. A easy button.
Don't know that any
Who knows?
is going to exist. Maybe someone will build one. You also have to remember, NPSP, just NPSP, it's stakeholder relationships and fundraising, and that's it. It has other packages that you can install with it, but that's actually it. Versus NPC, which is a lot more feature set, so you're never probably going to have full mappings. I don't know at what point they'll get full mappings. They might do like a PMM to program, but keep in mind when we're talking about NPSP, we're talking about fundraising pretty much. So some of the resources that are going to come out from Salesforce or the data migration one that's out, it does just cover the fundraising part because that is really just the NPSP part.
But Salesforce is pushing org migrations when you're thinking of going from one to the other, in my experience.
Yes.
And that, I mean, that's partially because the AEs don't know what they're talking about half the time, but that's what they're telling people.
It's difficult, and I don't know that anyone has done one live of migrating in place because there's just a lot to unwind, and it kind of knocks you out of functionality. If you're trying to do that live in an org, your org kind of becomes non-functional for a bit. That would be true of kind of really any industry cloud or any massive change. Like think about NGOC. Trying to migrate live in place from an NGOC was not really, I mean, that's just a mess. You know, like you can't
That's where
really
it still
do that.
exists too,
Yeah. So it's like, it's really, if you're doing any major package thing like that in Salesforce, you kind of have to do the org migration because you would essentially probably disable your org during part of that otherwise. There might be instances that come up where that might get easier to do, but it's just, you risk disabling your live org while you're trying to deal with that.
I've come across in real life one org who's attempting to do it.
How's it going so far?
I don't know. It was like seeing a jaguar. It was like, wow.
There's one of those in the
I'll
wild.
have to follow up.
Any other questions here? There's 2 more online.
I have a question. Yeah. Do you all have, in your experience, any go-to apps or softwares that you'll use in conjunction with nonprofit cloud? I'm thinking of like events or emailing or intake donations like Classy, things like that.
I'll do email first, and then if you want to. Email, most of the email platforms out there, or several of them, already dealt with person accounts. And that's kind of the core thing you have to pay attention to. So when you're looking at tools and their compatibility with NPC, if you look on App Exchange, they'll often say whether or not they are compatible, sometimes with nonprofit cloud, but definitely with person accounts. Pardot, Marketing Cloud, a bunch of the other, independent platforms out there, they already dealt really well with person accounts. So in that case, it kind of doesn't matter if it's NPC or it's Sales Cloud with person accounts, because if they can already deal with person accounts, you'll be okay there.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can't answer, hey, these are apps that we like, but the one thing I'll go back to is my sticky note that says the contact object still exists. Just because it doesn't say nonprofit cloud, I mean, that it's compatible with nonprofit cloud, it could be that it doesn't really matter. If it's not interacting with the fundraising, I mean, if it's not trying to cross the fundraising model, probably doesn't, I mean, it's a lot of times it doesn't matter. As long as it is not gonna get, you have a hiccup when it doesn't have a contact with a business account parent, then it becomes easier to do. So you don't have to look for, is this NPC ready, but you do have to look for what is the integration pattern. And that's a, and so some things we've used that aren't NPC ready have a conflict in some areas. We just don't use that part of the pattern.
In 2 areas, I will say it does matter. Anything that's pointing or that's used to pointing at the opportunity object for NPSP and assuming your donations are going to load there, that's not going to work with NPC because you need it to load to the gift transaction object. So you need to check with the donation platforms. There's several out there, FinDoc, Fundraise Up, Classy, several of them are NPC compatible. Some still have not gotten there. The other thing you have to be careful of is the API version. So because this is a newer product, it needs at least, is it 58? I think it's 58. At least version, I want to say 58, to have the objects even be available. So that for those of you that aren't familiar with working with APIs or looking at the version, if you've got an earlier API version, it doesn't see any objects introduced after that API version. So if the fundraising objects are introduced in, say, version 59, and the tool you're trying to work with only goes up to version 58, it doesn't see those fundraising objects. Like when fundraising was first released, it was actually a huge problem. Form Assembly couldn't see them. A bunch of the popular projects could not see the objects. So you have to check that API version if you're not seeing the NPC objects when you're using that tool. So check API, check, is it actually, if it's something dealing with donations that needs to, the dollars coming in, can it see the NPC objects? That's when NPC compatibility really is important.
Just some other things that didn't see those objects, MuleSoft, dataloader.io.
Some of Salesforce's
Tableau.
own products.
MuleSoft and data loader are Salesforce products. What do you mean they didn't
Yes,
see
they
them?
are. They did
Tableau.
not see those products or those objects for a bit.
How do they get away
That
with
was
this?
am I going nuts here?
Yeah, and it's not just NPC, it's really any new object that comes out, It hits NPC because it's a newer product.
Coming back to the discussion earlier, Doty's asking, does or might nonprofit cloud best practices produce a document to help people make a decision with should they go with NPSP or NPC if they're doing an implementation? Sounds like you've done some of that with clients one-on-one, but is there more of a?
It's something we could take as a suggestion for a resource. You also can email that address and suggest things to us. We take suggestions. We do. Doesn't mean we can always do them. Some of the suggestions people came up with at the sprint were like, yeah, we can't do that.
And it may end up in a big, 72 point, it depends.
Yeah, and statement that says it depends. But no, we do take, and we took some suggestions from the sprint of potential resources that folks would like us to make.
Last question I had, we talked a little bit about the contacts still exist, but Alex is asking if you have person accounts, it's safe to just not use contacts at all.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would say if you are implementing, I know people have feelings about this, so I'll just take my position. If you are doing person accounts at all, and you actually do need to do them for fundraising in NPC, there are some parts of it that only work with person accounts. If you're going to implement person accounts, just go person accounts all the way, because I feel it's a really confusing user experience to be like, do I do this as a contact or do I do this as a person account? What list view should I look at? What about my reporting? I think that's a terrible user experience. You can implement NPC with just contacts if you're doing, say, grant making, or if you've got only a program and case use case. You do have to consider whether they would ever want to implement fundraising in that instance. But like some family foundations where that's it, they're only ever going to do grant making. They will never implement anything else in NPC. It's okay to use contacts then. But if you're going to go person accounts, go all person accounts. I don't know, Toby, I think you may feel the same, but.
I feel exactly the same as
I mean,
Dawn.
intuitively, it just seems like they should be mutually exclusive, like one or the other. having both seen.
Yeah, and a mixed model is, I mean,
It's
I
not fun
just,
for the users.
I strongly disagree with that. Now, there's one thing that, I mean, there's one thing that is there, that in answer to that question, is it okay to just use person accounts? Yes, and we try really hard to hide all of the places someone might see the word contact, but there are places where you can't hide it. So the reality of a contact still exists in the org. And so you can mitigate that, but you can't get rid of it entirely. So it is one of those things that you just, when you're first trying to get used to it, you get hung up in this person account thing. But then once it's implemented and it's implemented right, you can go back to calling them contacts and it doesn't hurt anything. They're just contacts that don't have a parent business account.
And for folks that may not know or haven't dealt with person accounts, the original implementation of person accounts, which NPSP, I think version 1 used, was bad. It was painful, but they've improved a lot on them. Are they perfect? No, they're not. They're still a virtual object, but they are leagues better than the original release of them. So I think a lot of folks have fear of using them, especially since they are known to be not compatible with NPSP. So for years, work with NPSP, we're all told, don't go near person accounts. It's okay to say yes to person accounts.
2 years into my relationship with person accounts, I can say I kind of like them.
It doesn't need therapy anymore for person accounts.
I like people.
Some folks still do.
All right, that's all I had online. Any other questions here?
I sort of have one that I'm holding on to. We find ourselves having set up Sales Cloud with NPSP, but aren't using it for that purpose. We have a separate philanthropy system, and we're about to get all that philanthropy data moved over just for marketing purposes into Sales Cloud. And the question is it probably NPCs in our future? And so I'm wondering if there's a place that we should put that information in Sales Cloud rather than using the full NPSP, because maybe we're sort of creating more work for ourselves by moving into NPSP versus maybe creating some custom fields or something like that where we keep this info.
I would take a good long look at your options and because there's lots of ways to go, and there's some pros and some cons.
Yeah.
It might be, well, I'm not a doctor.
Depends.
And it depends, but, and I can't give legal advice. But in a case like that, you may look at bringing that philanthropic giving data in as a record type in the objects, just so you're not having the household bloom by bringing, so you could use NPSP, use those record types, but not turn on necessarily all of the features in it. So there's lots of ways to go, and I would just take a little bit of a step back and start to look at what happens when you use that functionality and what parts of it, because it's not a one size fits all even in NPSP. So.
And also a lot more consultants and partners are getting used to, there are folks moving from NPSP to NPC. And so I know, like for us, we have SQL scripts for it already. So you're gonna encounter more and more people that are used to mapping those things out. So it will become more and more common.
Yes.
And will not become really a point of that much concern. If your data is fairly simple, and you can map it fairly simply in there, it's not gonna be a problem to flip it from NPSP to NPC. Especially as you go along and more people start migrating over the years, it's just gonna become a lot more common knowledge how to do that.
We've done migrations from Sales Cloud to NPC and from NPSP to NPC, and lots of mixtures of all different types of those things. And I just don't feel like it's that much to be scared of. There's a little bit of getting everything in focus, and then it's really just data mapping, and it's just there's more places to put it. So.
Wonderful. Well, that's all of our questions. I want to give a
Thank you.
big round of applause.
Thanks to everybody
Lots
online
of,
as well.
lots of love coming in from online, all the comments and chats and stuff. They were very appreciative. We will post this
Ryan's a,
recording.
Ryan's a sprint participant,
Yeah.
wasn't in our group, Ryan's a
Emma's,
sprint
Emma's
participant.
there.
So you've got some sprinters online too.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm gonna shut down the online. I will post that recording, so look for it in your email. I'll also put it on LinkedIn. There's a couple threads that got started, so look for that there. Thanks so much, and stay on the lookout for upcoming events.
Hopefully some folks will be interested in sprinting with us.
That was a little nerve wracking.
With the camera?
Having
I was like off
the
camera the
audience,
whole time.
the audience, no, you turned and
Oh, damn, I was hiding over here.